What's up, YouTube? Welcome to the weekly review for July 6th through July 12th. My name's Andrew. I'm a business owner and growth partner. And in these reviews, I talk about what I've learned in life, business, entrepreneurship, and share them with you all. For this week's video, I actually want to start by talking through my business ecosystem. Whenever I'm talking to people about what I do, it can be kind of complicated to explain because I have multiple businesses, projects that I'm working on at any given time. So I want to outline them here, explain kind of how they work together, how they came about, so that you have better context on what my day-to-day life looks like. So first, we have my digital studio, Low Tide. Now, I first started this business a few years ago. I think it was like 2019, 2020-ish, and I've used it to be able to work with clients and provide services based on my skill set. Previously, it was called Ace Media. We rebranded to Low Tide last year, and we also added in app growth services because that's what my partner does. So now our services are like paid media, paid search, web and app reporting, app store optimization, app growth in general, and then we also do like audits and consulting. What I like about this business in particular is it provides a lot of freedom to me and lets me work with a lot of people in different capacities. So like, even though we have those services kind of outlined on our website, that is not all that encompasses my work within it, because I'm able to adapt and fit whatever people need. I'm kind of like a digital handyman in a sense. So for some of our clients, I function as a growth partner, like I mentioned, and I work in between teams where I mostly do marketing, but I also advise on business and strategy as a whole and brand. And then I'm able to provide a lot more value. So the next business is Warren and Company. And this one is actually more of a passion project, kind of like creative outlet for us. It is based on our heritage and growing up in the rural Midwest and what that means to us, and really showcasing that through a brand. It's a bit of a labor of love. It is not a business that we're necessarily building to be like a financial heavy hitter for us. Next up, we have an e-com product that we have been developing all year. I think at the end of last year, we were talking about starting a new business and what we wanted to do and how we wanted it to serve us in our lives. Like, what fulfillment were we looking for? And we came into e-com for a couple of reasons. Number one, I'd kind of been in this space quite a bit by that time and had learned a lot and felt like it was something we could really thrive in for a lot of reasons. We've done so much within that space already that we felt really prepared to dive in further. But then the question was like, okay, if we do that, how do we want to do it? And we landed on having a completely new product. It's taken some time to go through all of the design and tech pack creation and prototyping and things like that to get to a place where we're ready to launch. And we are probably within a month or two of being able to launch. So these two are actually really close together in timeline. But this is our business ecosystem. We are people who like to be doing a lot of things at once. I know a lot of people say like you should niche down, you should focus on one thing. That's just not really how I function. I like to enjoy life, and it just never has to be that serious. This is what we're working on right now. Now, to cover a couple of maybe FAQs that I get whenever I talk to people about my businesses and how they function and all of the things that I'm working on, is number one is, how do you balance it all? And I would definitely say that this type of life and choice is not for everybody. Because for a lot of people, having one thing that they're focusing on is plenty. But like I said, that's just not really how I function. I like to have a lot going on, and I have very, very big goals. But for me, it's much more beneficial to be working on all of these because I see the value in each one. All of them play a role in my life and how they're fulfilling me and what they're serving. But it takes a lot of intentionality to balance it all. It takes a lot of thought, process, planning. This work is my life on a daily basis. I spend a lot of time with my family. I have a lot of other values and priorities as well. But on a daily basis, it takes a lot of focus, and it just takes a lot of clarity on what your priorities are. So it's totally possible. The other question that people ask is about financially, how much are the businesses making? What does that look like? Which is a completely fair question, and one that I always wonder about other people. So what I'll say to that is, whenever you're looking at it, Low Tide is the only one that is currently making revenue, because these two are still pre-revenue. They haven't fully launched yet. So there's nothing really happening for them to be making income. But this one, I will say, we have a good like 5-figure MRR, and it is growing. So we're very happy with it. It serves its purpose, like I said. And it's also helping to fund these other businesses. So this is why I call it an ecosystem, is because they aren't really fully standing alone. They're different concepts, different projects and stuff, different businesses. But this one is very important for the others. All right, so let's get into learning. Starting with Sunday, it's a pretty simple concept, pretty simple learning, but it's just you need to believe it for it to happen. I found that I was limiting myself on a daily basis because I had some subconscious thoughts about whether or not I'd be able to do what I want to do. And what this really comes from is the fact that I'm going from theory to reality. And the thing that we rely on to understand this gap and what it means and what it's going to look like, and if it's possible to jump that gap, is proof. So this is why, if you've done something before, say, let's put it in terms of like running a marathon. If you run one marathon, then you have that proof. So even if you're taking another marathon, like you want to do another, and you're taking it from theory to reality, you have that proof that you can do it and you've done it before. So it's easier to bridge this gap. If you haven't done it, if you haven't gathered that proof for yourself, then it can be really scary. This gap can be very, very scary. And so that's kind of what I've run into is there are things that I am actively doing and about to be doing in business that I have felt for a long time in theory I'm fully capable of. But now that I'm faced with like actually doing it and having to dive in and kind of go head first into it, it just caused a lot of doubt. So what I did to combat it was I let up on the pressure on myself. And I said, if all of these things, if everything I'm working on fails, I am still okay with doing it because what I care more about is the fact that I'm creating and building. If I create and build forever, like that is what fulfills me. So that is what allowed me to kind of, again, release the expectation, start to believe that it can happen and just like embrace that it can happen. And then in time, I will find that proof. On Monday, I thought a lot about the power of rooting habits. Rooting habits are all about this word, which is the rooting. It is rooting in your values and in your goals so that you can maintain alignment throughout your day. So what I did was I have rooting habits in the morning, afternoon, and evening. And they help me reconnect and recenter to my purpose and my overall like values and goals. Because what I felt was happening was at night, I would have a very idealistic perspective on what the next day could look like. And then inevitably the next day, I would kind of lose sight of it. So now in the morning, I focus on taking my dog on a walk. I do cold exposure. In the afternoon, it's always movement. And in the evening, I do a reset where I assess all of my to-dos for the next day, priority tasks. And then I also do some reading, no phone time, before bed. And all of those things remind me of my purpose and my overall goal and what kind of lifestyle I want to be living on a daily basis. On Tuesday, I thought a lot about how mixed signals impact progress. And what do I mean by mixed signals? I mean unintentionally resisting things or putting friction out that then impacts the universe's ability to provide to you. So I'm going to use a very real example in my life of this and probably what prompted this initial learning. July is a very, very busy month for me in business and in life. I have a lot of family stuff going on. We're leaving for a trip this week. We have, again, those businesses that are very, very close to launch, but also a business that's growing. So there's a lot happening. I have a lot of responsibilities and things I need to keep up with on a daily basis. And what I noticed was with some of the newer opportunities coming up, instead of embracing them and diving in, I was feeling resistant because in my head, I was like, well, I'm too busy. There's too much going on. I'm too busy. First of all, that type of narrative saying I'm too this, I'm too that is not good because what I am seeking in my life is busyness. Like if everything that I am doing right now goes very, very well, then I haven't even touched the level of busy that I will be at. So saying that now is actively working against that progress. But then it also closes a door to the universe. So I'm saying, I see this opportunity, but I'm going to push against it. Even though I want it, I'm going to push against it because I think it's going to overwhelm me. It makes me think of a quote from Seneca where he says, "We suffer much more in the imagination than in reality." This applies in a lot of ways, like with anxiety and things like that, but it also applies to busyness. I think that our perception of how busy we will be is always over-exaggerated when compared to how busy we end up being. So for me, in this learning, it was really about getting very clear on what it is that I want. And so I intentionally said to myself, I want to be busy. I want opportunities. I want to feel a little stressed, a little scared, because I know that that's when the growth and the progress is happening. Now let's talk about the comparison game. This was a big one for the week. I feel like it was a pretty important understanding for me to gather, but I also think that it's very relevant nowadays, especially online. Like, again, if you're watching this, then I can probably make some assumptions about who else you might watch. I think that comparison is a really nasty trap that we get into, but I think there's a different way to kind of view it, and that's what I want to share. So when we talk about comparison, let's start with you, put you in the middle. And there are people above you and there are people below you. Now, I don't like to view things necessarily as a hierarchy like this, but this is kind of how things are going to be placed in your head, so it'll make sense. So when you look at the people above you, this is typically what we think of when we say things like comparison is a thief of joy. Typically, that makes you think, okay, I shouldn't compare to the people up here because it's going to make me feel ungrateful for what I have. And that's completely true. It's completely valid. But what I thought about this week was that another way that comparison can steal your joy is if you are comparing to people down here. An example of this is, say, at the end of the day, I am being kind of hard on myself and I'm like, I didn't work hard enough, I didn't do enough. But then I end up saying, well, I'm doing a lot more than other people. That is actively lowering my bar. It's lowering my standards and saying it's okay that I acted like people who are not where I am in life, or who are not working as hard as I am or doing as much as I am. And that to me is the ultimate thief of joy, because I want to be getting up here, right? I want to get to where they are. And so if I am lowering my bar to here, then I'm working against that progress. I'm like going against that current. This to me was a very, very big learning, because I realized that I was kind of letting myself off easy a little too much. When comparing to the people up here, I think it can be very, very beneficial, because the reality is if I want to get there, then I have to have some attributes, some behaviors, habits that they do. It can steal your joy when you get too obsessed with it. Now, the last piece of this is that your number one competitor should always be you. You set your own standard, your own bar, and you should always be looking at what your best is and trying to one-up yourself. Because really, these, at the end, don't matter. You literally only have yourself. So if you're competing against yourself every single day, then that is how you guarantee growth. Thursday was simple, so it'll be pretty quick, which is rejecting selfishness in business. Now, what I mean by this is I had a call on Thursday with a guy who reached out. We connected over like Twitter and then Instagram, and we had a chat just to talk about business. And he has an e-com brand he's working on. We both have similar interests with like content and things like that. So we had a really good talk. And then I spent a portion of my night putting together a deck of resources for him. My thoughts on how he could improve his conversion rate optimization, how he could improve his ad assets, and then just general like marketing resources that I use for e-com brands. Now, everything in that deck was really coming from my own playbook. And so there are things based on my experience, my education, my learnings, all put into a deck for free for him. It made me think about how much selfishness there is in business and how that selfishness can block you from like fulfillment and connection. Because me providing that to him could make a massive impact on his business. It could not, who knows, but like it could have such an impact to him, and really it just took a bit of my time one night. So it just made me think about how I try to be pretty selfless in business, and it's something that I want to keep within myself as I grow, as I evolve, because I feel like we could use a bit more of it. The last learning for the week that I want to share was the benefits of staring at walls and the power of a quiet mind. So I feel like lately I've been dealing with a bit of like a creative block where I sit down, I try to create, and I feel incapable to the extent to where I start to question whether or not I can create. And I started to think through my days and how the 2 times of the day that I feel like I have my best problem solving ability and I have my best creative thoughts are 1 in the shower, which is not unique, and 2 whenever I'm laying in bed about to go to sleep. Now there's a clear common denominator here, which is that I have no distractions in those times. I have no screen in front of my face, no notifications going off, but it really got me thinking about how creativity happens in silence and how I need to intentionally spend more time staring at walls. Now, I could get very deep into the benefit of a silent mind and how bad all of these distractions and the consumption is for our brains, and maybe I'll talk about that more at another point. But the point is that I had been looking for creative inspiration everywhere else. watching YouTube, scrolling on Pinterest, scrolling on TikTok, like waiting for creativity to strike me and ideas to come through. But it wasn't until I stepped back and just like let myself be and let my brain have like silence and space that things started to come through. So some ways that I'm going to try to build this into my life is just intentionally adding in time throughout my day to do nothing. Now, whether this is sitting on the couch and staring at the wall, laying on my bed, sitting outside, it doesn't really matter. Going on a walk with no distraction, it truly doesn't matter. It is just time and space for my mind to be clear and quiet. And I think that's going to have a massive impact on my ability to create. And with that, that is a wrap on this week's review. If you've watched this far, I really appreciate it. If you have any thoughts, questions, or want to share your own learnings, I encourage you to comment below. And I will be back next weekend with the next one.